Hello folks, my name's Glen Crickett and I'd like to welcome you all to Hokitika, West Coast, South Island. Our property is 17.2 hectares and it's approximately 12 kilometres north of Hokitika. My partner Catherine and myself purchased this property coming up 17 years ago now, and originally we had the idea of planting eucalypts, mainly Eucalyptus nitens, solely as a copicing firewood business. That was the initial plan. When we first bought this property, it was quite different than what you see now. This is all pod soiled, glacial washed, devastated by glaciers and centuries of rain soil. The soil nutrients and pH levels were basically zero, and through here was basically sphagnum moss up to your knees and gorse and blackberries and flax over your head. So we sort of thought, what are we going to do? So for a start, at the time, the main method of soil preparation in Westland was V-blading. And the idea of V-blading, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is a bulldozer goes through, flattens down a row, the width of the blade. The bulldozer then turns around 180 degrees, puts the blade down again, puts out two hydraulic blades on the edge of the blade, so the bulldozer blade becomes like a bow of a ship. The blade then gets hydraulically pushed down to the hard iron pan, and the bulldozer moves forward and it raises two raised beds about yay high on both sides of the bulldozer, which actually lifts the soil up above the stagnant sitting water and actually gives the trees something to start growing on. Now this has proved very successful in parts of Westland with planting Pinus radiata. First 5 or 6 years with the Eucalyptus nitens, hey, things worked really great. These trees just took off. Wow, we're doing it. By about 7 years, trees started falling over. By about 8-9 years, more trees started falling over. By about year 10, lots of trees were falling over. What happens with the eucalypt? This is a Eucalyptus niten. Eucalypts, you know, they're a native of Australia. A couple of hundred different species. One thing they all have in common is that they don't like too much water. Australia is a dry climate. Here in Westland, where there's so much moisture in the soil, because they don't have to put their roots down far to go looking for water, the trees will grow to be a reasonable sort of a size, but then they will basically outgrow their ability to hold themselves up, and that's when they get very top heavy. There's nothing in the ground holding them. Boom, over they go. So we reached the decision of we can either stand back and do nothing, or we can try and do something to rectify this. And so basically there's no cheap option, there's no easy option. What we decided to do was we came through the V-bladed areas with a 12-ton hydraulic digger and basically dug down through the iron pan and broke the iron pan. And in this paki type country, breaking the iron pan has the same effect of taking the plug out of the bath. It means that the water can get away. Once the area started to dry out, sure, we still had and we still have 1 or 2 trees falling over, but it's like a 90% success rate compared to what it was. So if you're planning on buying a block of land and planting trees, every area in New Zealand, and this is what makes New Zealand quite unique. For a small country, we have lots of diverse regions and localities, and every area has its own individual benefits and problems. So before you actually start doing anything on your land, have a wee think about what you want to plant and what those plants actually require. You know, sure, we'd all like to be able to grow Ecuador bananas, but not many places in New Zealand are suitable for that. So in all seriousness, I think that's very important, and that's probably one of the best bits of advice that I can give anybody. Find out what your locality and climate is all about. Find out what species will actually grow there. Find out what you might have to do to enhance the species' chances of growing. This is approximately 1.5 hectares of Pinus radiata, planted about 16 years ago, shortly after we moved in. decided to plant the radiata just to have a bit of diversification away from the gums, you know, try and not have all the eggs in one basket. Unfortunately, with knowing very little / basically nothing about plantation forestry at that time, the chap at the nursery where we purchased these seedlings from basically saw us coming, and unfortunately we found out later on after we'd planted that these radiata were part of a lot that had been sold to a forestry company that had since been rejected for various reasons. The radiata just weren't up to spec. Anyway, never mind, we all learn as we go. By then the trees were in the ground. So at about 3 to 4 years old, we planted some Tasmanian blackwood through here. Good thing about the Farm Forestry Association is that there is a number of sub-branches, pardon the pun. You've got the Amigo group, you've got your cypress groups, you've got your Lusitanicas, you've got all these other individual groups within it. Now, in case you don't know what the Amigo group is, it's not a collection of travelling Latin American guitar players. It is actually a group of private individuals, a bit like myself, who are members of the Farm Forestry Association, who specialise in Tasmanian blackwood, and that is their passion. After I'd found out about the Amigo group and their recommendation, we actually purchased these Arthur River seedlings for the Tasmanian blackwoods, and away they went. The plan over summer is to come through, count our losses with these radiata, basically clear fell them, then get up, start doing crown pruning with these blackwoods and fertilise them, and hopefully, touch wood, they will actually start to crown out and eventually grow into good productive trees. Basically, to sum it up, when you're purchasing seedlings and trees, shop around. Don't take the first offer from the guy who knocks on your door selling encyclopedias or life insurance. You know, go and get some second opinions, and this is where your local Farm Forestry Association comes in. There will be people there who either have nurseries or will be able to recommend good, reputable nurseries to get your stock from. And I've got to emphasise that, because if you're planting trees there again for your part of your retirement portfolio, you might be waiting 25 to 30 years to get a return. You want to get it right from the start, and that's the most important part, is your soil preparation and your plant selection stock from your nurseries. Well, when Catherine and I first started with the operation here, we were just going to plant the nitens solely for firewood. After a trip to Tasmania in the year 2000, talking to some of the Tas forest chaps in Tasmania, that was when we realised that Eucalyptus nitens had a few other uses apart from just pulpwood and firewood. And so we came back to New Zealand and we started pruning the nitens. And that was a bit of a joke locally, because nobody prunes trees that are firewood trees. But anyway, we had an idea that maybe eventually we would have a sawmill. And so after about 10-12 years of looking around at other sawmills, we decided on buying a Peterson winch production frame portable mill. One of the main benefits of having your own mill is that there's nothing worse than having a big windstorm come through and have some really good, potentially millable trees blow over and cut them up for firewood. And unfortunately we had a number of experiences with that, and it is heart-wrenching. But yeah, having the mill means that we can log when we feel like it, we can mill when we feel like it, and basically don't have to rely on other contractors getting the logs out, getting them transported to the mill. And here we are with the start of our future milling industry. 12-year-old Eucalyptus niten. Originally the property was based around producing firewood. Firewood was the main crop. Firewood now fortunately is the byproduct. So it's basically selling the firewood, which is parts of the log that are unmillable, and that is now starting to fund getting these logs out and covering the costs to mill them. Yeah, cutting down the trees. Don't take it lightly. Eucalypts, because of their quick growth and stresses and tension, very difficult, tricky tree to fall. I do all my falling what's called controlled falling with a 6.5 ton PTO driven winch on the back of a tractor with a winch rope. It's slow, but basically you're pulling the tree over pretty much exactly where you want it to go. With other trees in the area that I want to keep, in particular the Eucalyptus nitens further down, which are amongst where the nitens are being thinned, doesn't matter how good you think you are with a chainsaw and a wedge, you have one little whoopsie moment and you've just destroyed 3 or 4 really good blackwoods, or you spend the next 3 or 4 days fixing up your neighbour's boundary fence. Trees are very undemanding, you know, it's hard to explain it. They require so little, but they give so much. The bird life, the shelter. We had a stinking hot day here a few days ago, and all the cattle beasts were underneath the shade, underneath the tree in the shade, you know. Peterson said to me once when we very first started this venture, he says, "I think you're mad, you're crazy planting these trees." And I says, "Why is that?" And he says, "You're not going to live long enough to get anything out of the trees." And I said, "Man, I get something out of my trees every day." So think about what you want to plant, where you want to plant. If you have a dream to follow, you're going to get a bit of negativity by people that don't particularly like that species. But if you like it, you plant it. And I wish you all the very best, and good luck with your tree growing.